I'm so excited. I'm struggling to find the words to start the pod. Imani Barbarin, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yo, it's a blessing and a pleasure to have you on the show. You know, it's interesting. I remember one day, like when we, like you just were like, I looked at my little Twitter feed, and you was just following me, and I was like, why? How did we get? And you were like, I just thought you were cool. I was like, oh shoot, that's nice, and that like really cheered my day up. And, it was interesting though, because days were simpler back then. Yeah, that's all it took to cheer my day up back then. Of mine, the world was on fire, but it wasn't. It didn't feel like the flames were as hot as they are today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just like to follow cool people who are doing cool things and having good conversations, and like you were one of them. So,
listen, something I've just appreciated about you, and your advocacy and your thought leadership is you have been banging the cymbal, you have been ringing the bell, you have been insert metaphor and analogy, highlighting how connected ableism is to oppression more broadly. Like,
yeah.
I think, like, without this turning into a disability one-on-one podcast, because I don't like that. I would love to just hear your perspective on the point of how these things are connected. When we talk about racism and misogyny, and or rather more specifically like white supremacy and the patriarchy, and like we talk about these various systems and modes of oppression, I think it's easy for able-bodied people or people who presume themselves to not be disabled to ignore and dismiss this entire spectrum. So like I would just love to hear your perspective on the connectivity of these things, and also like why from your perspective do you believe it's often so overlooked as a topic of conversation?
Sure. So I think the best way to approach this without getting too much into like the disability 101 is to approach it through this like false dichotomy of allyship as a disabled person. There are so many people that are really only interested in disability through the lens of becoming an ally to disabled people. And I really have to shake people up and be like, I don't think you understand. Every single form of oppression that you already experience is tied to ableism. You're not saving me by talking about disability. You're saving yourself. And so there's so many bigotries and forms of oppression that they are their own thing, but they're also kind of like ableism is what pours the gasoline on top of a lot of those things. And a lot of people don't really realize that is the case. And that's the biggest problem. You could take, for example, anti-Blackness. A lot of times you'll even hear insults that sound like you're stupid, you're lazy, all things that are kind of tied to disability inherently. And there's a lot of people that don't see themselves as disabled because that is an identifier that they cannot afford to identify with, right? We're talking about hustle culture. We're talking about the economy. When you are capital, you have to consistently display value, right, in order to stay alive. And so disability for a lot of cultures is seen as something that you cannot afford to talk about.
Something you said there, first of all, everything you said there was fire. We're going to put the fire or a bomb, something, little sound effect here. In fact, I'm going to do it in a minute. Anyway, point is, but I do think that there's this like, and I believe like it's funny because we're like the landscape that we're engaging right now. It's getting riper and riper for critical assessment and challenge of like the capitalist systems we're engaging in. I think we're just in a different space. And I'm not saying we're about to sit back and like, seize means of production tomorrow, but I am saying that the conversations are becoming much more mainstream. And like, it's interesting. And like, I'm going somewhere with this. Like even like we talk about Zoran Mandami and like his rise. And it's like, I don't think Zoran is some raging communist or like far, far, far left socialist. He's really like, to me, like what I would imagine a regular liberal would be in terms of just, hey, like we just need to have like affordable things. Like this isn't sustainable. Some else is just logical. But one thing that he does that I think a lot of politicians right now are struggling with is just very concretely speaking to the function of capital and challenging challenging the function of capital being supreme all the time, right? And so it's like what you just said about, hey, like we're in this capitalist, we're like in a capitalist context, we are capital, and of course, black folks, we've been capital since we got here, and so this idea of you are capital. So if you present anything that shows that you are diminished capital, that you are diminished goods, or that you are in some way degraded, be it through your mental faculty or your physical faculties, or in a certain aesthetic, if you're too fat, if you're too short, if there's anything that's off about you from being good labor, a good workhorse, then to your point, we put you out to pasture. And I wonder, like, when I think about like ableism in the context of like this broader capitalist discussion, like I wonder what else it's going to take for people to really kind of like continue to open their eyes, right? Because like we're looking around and all those people that got COVID, so many people are still suffering from long COVID, whether they know it or not, right? Brain fog, struggling to walk up and down the stairs, certain just physical activities they used to could do, they just can't do anymore. And yet we're in this context where more and more rights are being taken away, accessibility is being denied, and capitalism incentivizes disinclusion in so many different ways.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, I mean, even just people who can't produce value are discarded. I mean, there's even evidence that the black children that were fed to alligators during enslavement were themselves disabled or showed visible signs of disability. And so that history goes a very long way. And when you think about how disability has been weaponized against so many different cultures, those cultures themselves kind of erase the history of disability, like the connection between disability and their race, or they decide to speak about it in ways that cannot be easily identified by the white majority, right? So we have this idea, particularly when it comes to COVID, that if as long as I keep trudging along, that I'm of value, then they can't say that I can't pay my bills, that I am still a part of society. And the reality is that when we look back on history, the Nazis made massive gains, massive gains during the 1918 flu pandemic because of a rising eugenics, because of this desire to consistently prove oneself as valuable to the overall society. And yes, there were other mitigating circumstances that led to the Holocaust, but this has been the trajectory that we've foreseen for decades. And a lot of times people don't realize that they are experiencing disability and the side effects of disability, right? When you're disabled, you start spending more money, period. Like you simply start spending more money because it's more expensive to accommodate your needs. And people will gravitate towards things that try to accommodate them just so that they can keep a job, to keep a roof over their head. And so we're not just looking at mass disablement, we're looking at the rise, again, of eugenics, because let's be clear, eugenics is an underlying culture in the United States, just like racism, sexism, and homophobia. But we're seeing that rise again because of the things in the social safety nets that we have not shored up for the American people.
Like, to that end, when I think about like even the gutting of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act that like we're looking at right now, and I literally thought about you. I know we already had this on the calendar. I was like, I just really can't wait to talk to. I'm even more appreciative to talk to Imani, because we talked about the last time you were here, and then again, like the meta narrative, the constant through all of the thought leadership I see from you is that, again, like disability and oppression, ableism, these things are directly linked with anti-blackness. And when marginalized groups, and I'm black, so I'm gonna speak to black. When black people, when we practice like misogyny and patriarchy, and even try to practice capitalism on each other and ableism on each other, like ableism, like we're compounding oppression And like, so when you looked at, when we see that this, the section 2 of this act, it's not a, it's about accessibility, right? So like,
Yeah.
as black people lose political representation, so will disabled people, and so will like
Right.
all sorts of people that are not white, able-bodied Christian men are going to lose access. And I think like there's this weird season, not weird, but there's this, to your point, like eugenics. It's like I believe that's an element of it. It's like, but I also think that there's this, because we're trained and taught and socialized to think in binaries, we can't really imagine disparate impact.
Yeah.
We can't imagine like multiple types of groups of people being harmed. I mean, the Supreme Court's going to hear is about to hear a case if people who smoke marijuana can have guns, and it's like, and obviously there's an homage there, there's a goal there to curtail black gun ownership and brown gun ownership, but also like there are a variety of disabled people who use medical cannabis for
Oh
their
yeah.
needs. There's, first of all, plenty of people smoke cannabis for their medical needs, but I'm just saying, you talk like there's all types of. It's just like, to your point, I just think that there is, what I agree, that we do not effectively or appreciate how eugenics is just threaded through everything that we
Yeah.
navigate in this country.
But not just that. I think that it's not just that eugenics is part of everything that we navigate, but a lot of people don't realize that eugenics as a concept is culturally translated. And I'm thinking about writing about this. But what cultural translation means from like a communication standpoint is they create communication that pushes the same idea but for different cultures, right? A good example is like the author who shall not be named, in the Harry Potter books. She took in one of the books, I think the pet they have a pet rat, but in many cultures you never have a rat in your house as a pet, right? So they exchange it for a frog in many other countries. Basically, it's the idea of making something as familiar as possible to make it as spreadable as possible in that culture. And a lot of people don't realize that eugenics was very much so a policy that was pushed on Black Americans through people like W.E.B. Du Bois in his early career. We think about like Pula Raza for Latino people, Latina people. We think about the stereotype of the tiger mom for Asian Americans, right? East Asian Americans. So there is a version of eugenics for every single culture that enters into Western society. What people just don't realize is that that's what's happening. It's kind of presented as we are proving them wrong, right? We're not. It's not eugenics. We're proving them wrong. They have IQ tests to prove that we shouldn't be able to vote or to have access to certain rights in America. But IQ tests were designed to be a eugenicist tool, right? Why are we using their toolkits to prove that we are valuable when we already have inherent value? And so we have eugenics that are culturally translated. And so people don't realize that what they're repeating is designed for their culture to push and spread eugenics for them, right? And so I think that a lot of people think that when they're talking about certain people not having kids or certain people not having guns, that they're actually talking about themselves. And it's kind of the most frustrating part about talking about ableism and eugenics as a society is that people think that because it's part of their culture, that it's not serving the eugenicist system of America overall.
That is super profound. Golly. And it's so insidious, right? To essentially like plant these seeds within other cultures and present it as something virtuous. Like I remember some years ago, like I had this conversation about, well, I was a consultant at the time, and just I'm in corporate American consult for those who are listening. I mean, if you think about like the Accentures, PwCs, Capgemini, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of times consulting, Deloitte, McKinsey, Bain, a lot of times consulting is like corporate America, like on steroids. It's like just very competitive, very scarcity mindset, fear driven. But what was interesting, and also like perfectionist culture. What's interesting is I recall just working on this PowerPoint slide, and it was like everything had to be just so Imani. It was like, this has to be this dimension and it needs to be flatlined to this. And I was like, and it was awful. But I also felt as if I did not have the same grace to like make as many mistakes as like my white counterparts did.
Yeah.
And my coach was at the time was like, well, you know, you black, you just got to be perfect. Right. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's crazy. But to your point, and I think something that happens across non-white, non-majority cultures is we're coached to essentially strive to outperform white supremacy as opposed to challenge white supremacy or seek to dismantle it, right? Because and then you know, if by some chance you end up not tripping and falling in a certain period of time, well then you've made it, and you and whoever else didn't, well, you just weren't strong enough, you just got to work harder. And so it's just it's like this cyclical thing that you just keep on chasing down, but you're not actually going anywhere. And I think that there's something to be said, like I have been just hyper cognizant the past several years, right? Just like observing white culture, observing majority culture, and just how they navigate things and spaces and places. And it's interesting how groups who have the most power, how much grace they get to just do things. Whereas like marginalized people from non-majority cultures, they don't have that same grace. Like the bar to execute is just much higher. And I mean, like, when you think about, I'm curious, as you think about like how you navigate spaces, like, do you see examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, I was raised in a Black excellence household. Like, my dad has postgraduate degrees from Harvard. My mom went back to get her master's while I was still in school. Like, I took the SATs at 13 years old and then kept studying for it. So I grew up in a household where that was the requirement, you know, to be excellence. And I think it's very difficult because as somebody who's both disabled and Black, you have to thread the needle because I have to be excellent enough to be included, but also disabled enough to get the accommodations that I need, right? And it's kind of like this mindset, too, amongst Black folk where it's like, I don't treat you any differently. And you have to come to them and be like, actually, you kind of have to, otherwise I can't be here. Like, you know, I need the ramp, I need the ASL translators, I need the cart services, I need somebody here to make sure that my inclusion is full and complete. And so there are so many spaces like that. Even in disability spaces, it's very weird because a lot of disability spaces are white-led. There are very rarely any organizations that are dedicated to Black and brown disabled people. And so you're in a lot of spaces where you're seeing white disabled people get away with a lot more. I remember at like a Netroots Nation conference, and this woman started going off about the Blacks and how the Blacks get more attention than the disabled people, and how and like all Black people were in the room like, what are you talking about? Like it was, but even still, it was like, oh, it's okay. Like you just, you know, calm down, lady. It's all right.
Calm down, lady. Talking to you?
No, to her. To her,
oh, okay.
They were like,
okay.
Everybody in the back room was like, excuse me? But Black and brown disabled people are usually in those situations, so it's kind of like a rock and a hard place. And then when you talk about the internal politics of Blackness in America, there are very many spaces where Black disabled people are not represented at all, or it's represented as, you know, as long as we act a certain way, we are palatable, which is a privilege in and of itself to be able to act a certain way, to be deemed desirable to be even in the room. So there's a whole ton of internal politics that like jockey back and forth.
You know what this reminds me of is when this was years ago. We had Alyssa Thompson on Ramp Your Voice.
Oh yeah,
and she was talking about like she had that hashtag disability so white, right? And I told her like in the pod, I said, you know, I said truthfully, my own privilege is showing so bad because I would not think that there would be disinclusion within the disabled community, But then it's like, but Zach, white people be white though. Like it's like they still white though. Like my common sense had to kick in. Like, wait, but they still white.
It's legitimately so funny because the amount of times black non-disabled people, or people who deem themselves to be non-disabled, have come to me and be like, I had no idea that there was racism in the disability circles. Yeah, all the time.
The only reason, like, I'm like straight up, the only thing I literally caught it as I said it out loud. I was like, well, wait, no, Zach, why would you? No, that's silly. There's obviously going to be racism anywhere. There's going to be anti-blackness, like anti-blackness is a global phenomenon, irrespective of like additional conditions, right? But I just think, again, it's my privilege talking. It's just like, damn, why?
I mean, I remember one time that I had an interaction online. I want to say it was like years and years and years ago. But I had an interaction where a white disabled person wanted the Americans with Disabilities Act to be overturned because it gave too much accessibility to black people.
That is crazy.
And so I was like, what? And literally, you have to.
That was me grabbing my mic, y'all. My bad. If y'all not watching the video, if y'all heard a bunch of crazy noises, I grabbed my mic and yelled into it very loud. I wanted y'all to understand that is nuts.
No, when people, I get so frustrated because when I talk about disability in politics, I talk often about how most disabled people vote Republican, and people think the lesson that I'm trying to give to them from that statistic is that, oh, well, disabled people are racist, which they're people. So why wouldn't you? First of all, that's the first thing. But also, you have so much work to do when it comes to including black and brown disabled people on your side in your politics, that you're too busy looking over them and be like, I can't stand them, instead of looking at the person next to you and saying, what are your political needs? And it's so frustrating. You go to these voting conferences on disability, you go to these organizations on disability, they're almost all white. And anytime you try to tell people, like, we need to get our head in the game, it's like, well, why can't you start it? I need help. We need help. Like, we need disabled people in politics. We need black and brown disabled people in politics. We need people with disabilities everywhere. And the barrier to entry is so high in a lot of places that a lot of disabled people can't organize. There are self-advocacy groups everywhere. There are disabled protest groups everywhere, but they're not getting the support from the overall community that white disabled people are getting. Not by a long shot.
To that end, like off mic, we were talking a little bit about, it was kind of like, how you doing? And like, look, with people I respect and I trust, I'm gonna tell them how I'm doing, So we talked about like, as the world is just on fire, right? And we were talking a little bit about the election, right? And I recall you being on Twitter and people being annoyed with you, and on TikTok, annoyed with you because of your critique of the Harris campaign. And it's funny. This is why I'm glad I am at the level of popping I am, which is not very high, because I say a lot of things that like.
But you followed me long enough where you're like, she's just gonna say it.
She's gonna say it. But I love you for it. I love you, period. But I love you for it. That also, it's like, what's funny is, so we had W. Kamau Bell on twice, before the election, and we said a couple things, and it kind of like went a little viral on TikTok, and I said, oh, praise God, I'm not like really famous. That would have went really bad. But I say that to say, I remember talking to my mom about the campaign, and I just remember talking, and like literally in the interview with W. Kamau Bell after her the DNC, the speech, like her, and I said, W, you didn't think that was kind of weird when she said we're gonna have the most lethal fighting force in the world, and like everybody cheered as if she was granting us reparations? He's like, yeah, that was weird. I said, you don't think that was kind of weird when she was like talking about how she's gonna have she's going to be more conservative, she's going to have more Republicans in her cabinet than Joe Biden did, and then like people were cheering that on, and did you see like when she brought the police officer up, but then they didn't bring the Palestinian? I said, but like we're all like cheering this on, and he was like,
Yeah.
yeah, he was like, yeah, it's just, he's like, yeah, I don't. I was like, he's like, I don't know. It's just weird. But I remember we posted those clips and people were like, you don't like black women. You don't support black women. And I'm like, is that what I said? I'm saying, like, are y'all like, it felt like we were like in this collective, not we, all of us, literally we, but like, there was like almost like this collective delusion that we were
Yeah.
under. My mom asked me, she's like, and that's what I said, Mom, I don't think it's going to happen.
I said the same thing to my mom. And what people don't realize is that a majority of my harshest critiques were for Biden. I had actually backed off one like a lot by the time Kamala Harris was announced as the nominee because I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew exactly what was going to happen, and they basically glass clipped her the whole time. Like if you read like clips from her biography, autobiography, 107 Days, it was very clear that like she was put in at the last second. And I never told anybody this publicly, but I knew since April 2024, like March or April 2024, that Biden wasn't running for president. Somebody called me, a disability advocate called me who like interfaces with the White House and goes, they haven't answered any of our questions on disability at all. Like, and this is something that they do every year. They didn't answer any questions. They said he's running on his record. There were so many. I remember making a video of that saying there are so many open positions. This is concerning this late into the election. Like there's no way that these are open positions at this point. There can't be. There can't be. Like there were so many open like communications jobs. Which, if you think about politics in America, it's all just communications and branding.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
But there were so many that I was like, that this can't be possible. And to think during the 2020 election, there were so many grassroots organizers that were partnered with the Biden campaign. There were also a lot of like cohorts, and there were a lot of connective tissue between the Biden campaign and a lot of the grassroots organizations because COVID was the backdrop of that election. No matter what people say, that was the backdrop. And so he was partnering with a lot of disability advocates and disabled people because he was going to them directly and saying, I'm going to save you. I'm going to save you. I'm going to save you. And a lot of that work has to do with Stacey Abrams, who in 2018 created an entire work group on disability, blackness, and voting because of what happened in the gubernatorial election in 2018. So a lot of that was dropped by the time the 2024 election even happened. So there were open positions that should not have been open at that point in April 2024. So I was kind of like, something's not right here. Like I couldn't say for certain, but I was like, he's not running. So the fact that in August of August of 2024, that's when he announced he's dropping out of the race.
You knew way before that.
Oh yeah, I knew way before that. It was, and so people were like, and also there's something about me that as a disabled person, I'm kind of allergic to toxic positivity. Anytime, like I really am, I can't stand it. Like anytime, because every other video I'm on, it's like, look at this disabled girl who got taken to prom, and you're like, why is this news? I can't stand it. And so you can kind of see a mile away that when there's more toxic positivity than talk about like a vision for America that outlasts any administration, then there's a problem. And I'm also not one to blow smoke up people's asses about like being happy about something or lying to them, because like I was telling people, you need to prepare for that man to be president again. Like nobody believed me.
And it's interesting. Again, so something that I've been like growing my understanding and appreciation for is, and again, that's why I just love having you on the show, being in virtual community with you, is like just the mindset to understand that these things are connected. Like something else that stuck out to me was when we talk about ableism and you talk about eugenics, is like you can't have any of these conversations, especially during like this, during that election and now, without looking at ableism and eugenics around the world, right? Sudan, Congo, Gaza, Palestine, the West, like settlements, the West Bank. Like, I mean, it's just I think that to your point about blowing smoke up folks' ass is like when there isn't consistency, right? So if you're going to talk about women's inclusion and even disability rights in the states, but then like you are creating disability or exacerbating
Yeah.
disability overseas through wars that you're funding, and countries that you're enabling a genocide for, it's hard for me to like really receive that. But like without us like trying to like relitigate and like re-examine Harris's failed campaign, I'm curious. Like we're now in this, we're now in the Fourth Reich with Trump. I'm curious,
Hmm.
like how are you navigating? How are you navigating this moment now, right? Because we're like in this. I mean, and again, like we have been in under authoritarianism for actually quite some time. Like you interrogate the history of
Yeah.
this country, I think it's so interesting to me. Like when we talk about the United States, and we talk about things. Sometimes it's almost like things never exist or happen until it happens to white people. But like the reality
Right.
is like black folks have been under, and black and brown people, certainly black and brown women, queer folks. We've experienced all types of fascism for several decades, really like for the past 400 years. However, so
Hmm.
I give that caveat to also still ask in this administration with the policies that they are rolling out as well as the policies they are dismantling. Like, how are you navigating that?
Well, I'm in a very privileged position in that I pay for my own health insurance, and I'm lucky enough to be able to pay my own bills and live independently. But a friend of mine who was on disability just passed away like less than 2 months ago, right next to me. And, I think that people have I think part of the reason why this fascism has taken hold is because people have a really fluffy idea of what actually happens to disabled people, to chronically ill people, and by extension, Black and brown communities around their health. I mean, we're talking about the dismantling of SNAP and Medicaid and Medicare and all of these massive programs. I remember I changed my friend's address for him to help him out, and they cut off his health care because his address changed. They cut off his health care, his food stamps, and his disability check because I simply changed his address. And it took 2 months to get his address, to get that rectified, right? I think a lot of people, and not to mention, there are groups on Reddit online that are search for disabled fakers, right? To kick them off of their health insurance. Like disabled people have always been in this massive surveillance state when it comes to our healthcare. And I wrote an article for Forbes about 6 weeks ago, saying that the Trump administration was utilizing social media to see if disabled people were too happy in order to kick them off of their health care,
Damn.
right? Yeah, I mean, and that policy never changed, by the way. They've been doing that for years. They've been searching your social media to see if you're too able or too happy to possibly be disabled. And so a lot of what we're seeing right now is the dissolution of a lot of these programs based off of disability stereotypes, racial stereotypes that aren't really rooted in reality. And the way that Republicans and the alt right think is the quickest path from point A to point B is a straight line. There's no room for nuance. There's no room for studies. They're going to make up the studies that justify their behavior. I mean, even RFK Jr., like talking about work camps for the disabled and autistic and neurodiverse. Do you know? So you know the term drapetomania, right? Escape slave syndrome.
Yes.
Do you know what the treatment, the recommended treatment for that was?
No.
Hard labor.
My gosh.
So we're really just kind of repeating stuff that like where we are kind of repeating these stereotypes, repeating these ideas that never worked the first time because they were rooted in bullshit, truthfully, and we're turning them into policy. So the only way out of this is to have a really anti-eugenicist thought process, is to really start to evaluate what we value in human beings, which is their inherent value, which is if you breathe, you're of value, right? And I think that there's so much of our society that wants to keep chipping away at who we're willing to give up. I'm not willing to give up trans people. I'm not willing to give up black people. I'm not willing to give up women. I'm not willing to give up disabled people. And we're like on the political sphere, we keep seeing people chip away and throw more people to the wolves, saying that as long as we get more of us in office, then we can try to protect them. But if you're willing to throw them to the wolves to get into office, there is no certainty that you're going to protect them. And so that's kind of the issue that we're seeing with our politics. And personally, as somebody that's like in this rock and a hard place, the thing I worry about most is the thing that people don't know, which is like asset seizure through disability law, right? Like conservatorships and guardianships, and those being weaponized against people of color because they don't know the system well enough to protect themselves financially.
Man, so it feels like you're alluding to the Ezra Klein interview with Coates, right? But that's also like just a yo.
I didn't mean to roll my eyes like that.
You say what?
I didn't mean to roll my eyes like that. Sometimes it just
no, I like it. No, it's good. It's good. Like, what was so funny is I remember. First of all, I was like, kind of going back to just like white privilege and just the amount of grace white people have, and like part of, and this is not trying to be funny. It's gonna come off funny, but I don't mean to be funny. Is part of the grace I also believe people in the majority have is they're allowed to grow and be stupid like in public. So like Ezra can just be wrong. Like he just stupid. It was a absurdly stupid thing to try to argue with anyone, let alone Coates, to say, right. We got to have power. And Coates is trying to talk to him through like the past like 100+ years, and he's like, well, let's just look at the last 6 years just for the sake of this conversation. And he's like, why would we do that? Then he says, well, we should just, we have to figure out there's certain things we're going to have to kind of, give up on to keep and maintain power. And it's like, where is the logic in that? And how are people, how do you build, retain, or engage people with that type of attitude? And when Coates talks about there has to be some type of line, again, it's like, man, the beauty of having different types of friends. I do hope that Ezra Klein eventually gets like a rougher black friend who will cuss him out and tell him, hey, sometimes you gotta shut the F up, Ezra. You sound ridiculous. Because we all have, for me, I have various types of friends. Like I have friends that are really gentle with me. But I have some friends be like, hey man, you looking crazy. You look nuts. You gotta stop and pull you aside.
Yeah, I mean, I just got a friend that will cuss me out over me, like not necessarily not even doing my own work, but like not like valuing myself enough. She's been cussing me out for like 3 weeks. I met her like 2 months ago.
But you need that, because see, I'm not going to be your cuss out friend. I'm going to be the nice friend, and I'm going to encourage you. But like, if you just have all that all the time, it's like, dang, this is great, Coach. You got to take that pillow off that glove, baby. You got to hit him. And so, but like to that end, right? I think. I agree with you that there's this tension right now, I think politically of, okay, well, what do I say and how do I appease and where is and they kept on talking about the line, but like certain things we just have to have, we have to have principles and we have to have lines that just don't move. Right. And with the confidence to know that we're going to win, we're going to lose, but ultimately we're still moving forward in a direction. If you're just a majoritarian, well, then you're going to just kind of be wobbling all over the place while continuing to wobble towards authoritarianism and fascism. So you have to have actually some type of moral stance on something, and you can call it a purity test if you want. You call it whatever you want, but you need to have stances.
Well, I mean, they've already, using the disability community as an example, they've already shown that doesn't work. I mean, when we talk about pro-choice and the pro-abortion movement, they threw disabled people to the wolves and lost it. Because what they didn't realize was that the way that they were talking about disability, so just a little bit of history, but the pro-choice movement kept talking about disability in the terms of abortion is a right because you don't want to have a disabled child. And a lot of disabled people were like, hey, we're not even, our reproductive rights aren't even set in stone. There's the court ruling of Buck v. Bell, which says that you can sterilize any disabled person on the basis of 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. But it's mostly been weaponized against women of color and black women. But anyways, but they kept repeating it, and disabled people kept saying, you need to stop saying that. They are recruiting disabled people to the pro-life movement as examples of failed abortions, So they had an entire speaking tour across the United States, across the world, that was using the pro-choice rhetoric against them, and they would not stop. And yet, now it's shocking to people that RFK Jr. is pinpointing um, that Tylenol gives children autism, quote unquote. Right? That's an extension of that rhetoric, which says it is a responsibility of women to not bring disabled children into the world. The proof is there that when you throw people to the wolves, you're only hurting yourself. And so to act as though that's a winning strategy in the year of our Lord 2025 makes no sense. It makes none.
You know, I'm going back to something. Do you believe that? Do you believe like capitalism is like the root of a lot of these problems? Like if we were anti-capitalist, because I don't know if, and I think that's kind of like we're kind of again slowly we're getting there of like, hey, you can't actually be pro money at all costs and also care about human beings, right?
Right.
And as I hear what you're talking through, like everything I'm hearing, and like in the back of my mind, again, like I'm biased because I am anti-capitalist. I don't like I'm here for something genuinely radically different. Like I would welcome that because like I just haven't seen, and I've had these conversations all the time off mic of just like show me an example of like capitalism like working well and like saving people. And every time people tell me, like, yeah, that's not capitalism. That's Marxist, or that's socialism, or that's a variety of other things that are not capitalism at all. Like, but I'm curious, like, where are you hoping we go? And like when you look at people like Mandami, and what's happening in New York, like, does that give you any type of hope?
Well, the fact that he knows how to answer a question gives me a lot of hope. But sorry, it does. It's like a full sentence and repeating the question back to you. That gives me a lot more hope than you realize. But true. I think when it comes to politics, yeah, like the quiet part is that when you have two parties trying to appeal to the same pool of capital, they're going to have the exact same policies. And realistically, and I keep telling people this and they don't believe me and they think I'm like a secret Republican, but if the closer that Republicans and Democrats come to each other, voters are just going to choose the people that are more successful at it, which is not Democrats, right? So you have to go the opposite direction. You have to go more leftist. You have to go more socialist, right? And if the people who vote for you are not alive, you're not winning. That's MLB of it. If they're not living, they're not. I mean, I'm being so serious. When I told, like, if they're not alive, they're not voting for you. You have to keep your electorate alive.
That dude who AOC lost to, and he died.
I know. Sounds funny.
He died. Like and I was like, there's so many things. I'm so serious. I've been thinking about like how ableism colors my analysis and critique of people. So like there are things I'm like, man, am I being ableist? But like, no disrespect. Like I cannot. I'm gonna pull up his name while we're talking. But when I saw him, and we finally hit, and I was like, come on, man, like you dying.
Here's my loophole. Okay, you can't say that to people.
I know. No. I was saying it to my wife, but I'm like, I looked at him on the TV and I was like, come on, like, why is this the best that we have? And again, my annoyance was like, first of all, where is your community to tell you to sit down? Like Imani.
Here's what I'm saying. It's not his community. Establishment Democrats would rather lose to a Republican than win with a socialist. That's the part of the problem. They're recruiting these older people who are going to kowtow to them at every single turn, right? And then give them whatever they want. They don't want a Mamdani. They want a Cuomo. They're more willing to lose with a Cuomo than win with a Mamdani.
Jerry Connolly.
Yeah. But here's where I stand on that, and it may not be popular. It's usually not popular when I say it. I have no problem with older people in office. What I have a problem with is that they're all older
All
people.
y'all old though. Like that's
Right, and that's the issue. They're all older people, and the reason why I don't mind older people in office is because 9 times out of 10, particularly on the Democratic side, that's how you actually get people invested in disability policy because they're aging into disability.
fair.
Right.
That's
Right.
yeah. Real talk. Well,
So like I would rather have that, but what I do believe in are term limits. You should not be able to run for 50 years in a row. I'm sorry, you can't.
you just can't. And like and I've also heard that apparently there's like a secret little hospital under that at like in DC where they get good care. Cause like
I believe.
yeah, so cause you saw Mitch McConnell fall.
I've fallen like that too with a question, an uncomfortable question. I also fall on hot people sometimes. So that's just
He fell, but he got up with the face of a man that has good health care. He smiled. I was like, that's not a broke. He's not broke. Cause if my grandmother fell, she not smiling when she. I'm telling you, it's he and yeah, and I hear you. Like my wife asked me to take out the trash yesterday. I fell over. But
oh no.
I do wonder about this. Is like, it's like, come on, man. Like, why are we putting out these octogenarians? And I'm not aiming to be ageist either, but it's just like, come on, like, what are we doing? And I hear you, and like, my thing is like, again, AOC. I'm not even like a ginormous AOC fan. It's just like, but you talk about somebody who is young and has energy and is willing to like at least try to act like they might be a little bit smidgen to the left. Why would you run against that to somebody that y'all went in full knowing that they were at stage 4 cancer? And again, I'm not saying, and I think I was talking to my mom. So my mom is interesting. You talked about your parents. So my parents are just now entering their 60s, right? So it's interesting engaging them and talking to them about them getting older and navigating the world as they become senior citizens. And and my mom was like, yeah, that this kind of takes me a little bit longer. And I've been talking to her about like, Mom, why don't you turn your location on? Maybe we get you a camera. She's like, I still want my independent. Like we talk about, we're having these really real conversations. I think a lot of millennials are kind of transitioning to that phase of kind of like wanting to, or actively taking care of their parents. But anyway, I'm getting off the mark because I want to talk to you about about ableism some more. And look, you are not the avatar for inclusion, for disability inclusion, right? But I'm gonna tell you, I genuinely I thought about you when RFK, and he be talking crazy, and he got that voice. It sound like
gravel.
It sound like a bunch of screws in a blender. Or a plug. And I asked my wife, I said, now what is it about this that I don't like? I said, because his voice is unique and like, that's fine. I think it's just that he's saying the most racist, ableist, misogynistic things. And also some of it's just outright nonsensical. Like when he talks about eating a bear off the side of the road, when he talks about doing heroin and it helping his learning development, when he talks about the steroids he takes. And then he also will talk about, like, again, to your point about Tylenol and autism, I struggle. And so I'm curious when we analyze and look at things, because I'm confident, right, that like, just like I participate in the patriarchy and there's a bunch of things that like I have to unlearn, like, what does it look like to critique somebody or make fun of somebody but not be ableist? Like, because like I feel like I'm gonna blame you. It's your fault. Before, I feel like I was so ignorant and ableist and didn't know, and now I'm like, dang, there's a bunch of stuff I really want. I can't even think because I feel awful.
No, I mean, when it comes to RFK Jr., I think the best way to address him is to address what he actually says.
Yeah.
I think that he's unfit in a lot of ways to be in the position that he's in. Not the least of which is that and the thing about RFK Jr. is that if you're a disabled person, none of what he says surprises you. Like, not a single thing, because a lot of those theories that he's pushing along started in autism on Facebook groups.
He's been saying them he's been consistent.
Yeah. Like it started in like these anti-vaxxer, Facebook mom, Facebook groups, these fitness groups. So a lot of what he's saying makes a lot of not necessarily sense, but it's just not a surprise to a lot of disabled people. But I think when it comes to critiquing, people like that, it's kind of like let's focus on what he's doing and what he's saying rather than who he is. Like he's simply the current iteration of this belief system, of this way of thinking. You want to be able to critique that as a through line, because if he's gone, they're going to get somebody else exactly like him with the exact same ideas. And what's more frightening about both him and Trump is the day that they get somebody that is better spoken than the two of them is the day it's
We're
over.
gonna be in trouble because people liked again. I'm forgetting names. It's interview. I don't know why, but the former vice president Pence, Mike Pence.
Yeah,
People liked
yeah,
Mike Pence. They were like, I had people and I had people around me, not too close now, but I had people I knew who were like, I kind of like
yeah.
this Mike Pence guy. I was like, how
People like George Bush now, like
people
that.
like
Like
George
what
Bush
the
now?
yeah, like time heals all memory. Like it erases all memory when it comes to this type of stuff. But the like you want to critique what he says because the through line is the idea that these people are simply just the figureheads right now. And what is more frightening to me is what happens when they get people that are more charismatic, better spoken. They don't trip over their words. They don't make up words. That terrifies me more than these two dipshits that are currently in office right
So
now.
transparently, like that's why like one of our former presidents is so terrifying to me because like they're so charismatic. But like when you
Right.
actually interrogate the things they're saying, it's like, hey yo, like that's crazy. Like
Yeah.
you just said
Very frightening.
it's I mean like I remember one time like I was listening to it was Obama obviously I'm obviously talking about Barack Obama. But we were talking about how like he had an interview where he did with Deesa Samero and he walked in with
Hmm.
like this like Gucci. It was Gucci or maybe it was Louis Vuitton, like black suit, all black. And he sat down. He was just talking, and like he does this thing, and I'm biased because I am a black man, so I'm just like, dog,
Yeah.
he's so. But like when you read his comments and statements on Palestine, when you read his comments and statements on like single payer, when you read his comments on a variety of different topics, it's easy for me, right, to kind of like get caught up in the presentation,
Yeah.
but like, but then like when you say, hey man, like you're dismissing an entire group of people, or hey, like you're saying this now, but like here was your policy in the Middle East. Here's some things that you could have done in past, but you chose not to. When people pressed you on it at the time, you just kind of like smoothed your way out of there. But like, and that's terrifying because, and there were millions of people who went along with that and who did not challenge it as much as they could have because, to your point of the presentation, he wasn't some loud, messy, offensive, whatever. And so you're right. Like,
Yeah.
God forbid we get into a season where there's someone who is like half as charismatic as that presenting these
Yeah.
ideas.
And I mean, I grew up in a very pro Obama household. Like, you've seen the coasters, the T-shirts. I have a painting of Obama that I did in 10th grade. It's terrible, but my parents kept it because they thought I was prophesying Obama's presidency 2 years later. We were one of those households, but I think particularly as Black people, we have settled on representation being the only reparations we're going to get. And so what we feel is the diminishing of like Black excellence. It's almost like we're fighting to not to not lose those reparations from slipping through our fingers, right? Rather than looking at this person who is a political entity in and of themselves, that we do want to critique with power. They do have power over us, and I don't think it's wrong for people to look at that and be like, okay, well, why aren't we getting single payer healthcare? Why are we spending money to bomb Syria? Why are we in all of these conflicts to this day? And so, and there's also a similar thing with the disability community where um, part of the reason why a lot of disabled people vote Republican is because Republicans are the face of disability rights in this country, by and large. Right? Like by and large, like a lot of the disability rights that we get in our country were passed by George H.W. Bush. We have, um, that is the seminal act, and I think the 504 sit-ins was also passed. The 504 sit-ins was also enforced by, I think, a Republican administration at the time, particularly because it was post-Vietnam War and Vietnam vets were coming back and not being able to actually navigate their community. So it was like a very pro-war policy at the time too to pass the ADA. So yeah, like I think people are going to go with the people that they see as kind of figureheads of their progress, rather than actually looking at whether we are making progress overall. And I think that that's a scary place to be in, because it's more about the manipulation of communication rather than the advancement of rights and humanity overall.
Oh my gosh, we're not we're gonna land the plane soon because I got your hour. But you said something now. I gotta reply. Okay, so like I also to that point, I think what's scary is, and I think now again this was not like Obama did not like usher this in, like, because I would say we had this like with JFK as well, but I would say in modern time he kind of like brought in like really like this like the the celebrity with the presidency, like the like
Yeah.
this and it being about like name and face and identity and charm, or just like pull and popularity, because he was just so magnetic, right? So electric as a candidate and as a leader, right? And so
Yeah.
like but to your point, what's scary about that is, and I'll say to your point also when it comes to like black folks and brown folks, is we then got really excited about, we got even more excited about the symbolism and the performative show. So it's like, hey, where like why aren't we codifying Roe, or why aren't we like really like shoring up voting rights, or why are we not passing an anti-lynching legislation, or why are we not doing all these different things? Well, don't worry about that. We got this event at the White House. We're gonna have Questlove and Usher and so and so come out. We're gonna have a party, or we're gonna name this thing up. And it's like yeah, but like we have to be really thoughtful about and interrogating like actual policy decisions. And like
Yeah.
I get concerned because I've gotten invited to different things, like
Hmm.
black celebrations. I'm sure you get them think like different things. And like there's things
Yeah.
I've declined because I'm just like, well, like I'm struggling when I think about the communities I come from and the needs of my family, my cousins and my in-laws, and those, and like, well, where's the pop, like what substantive changes are we making, or are we just excited to kind of like continue to kind of gather at this little at the head of this needle where there's less and less of us over time because we aren't making any real changes.
Change. Yeah. Well, the thing I've been saying and repeating over the last few months is that cultural change will never stick if, as long as it's not backed by policy.
Mm.
Right? We can have the rainbow crosswalks. We can kneel in kente cloth. We can have disabled people headlining, stand up comedy, which stand up hate crime. But you know, but the problem is that if it's not backed with policy, it is a house built on sand. It is a house built on sand. And so you can have all of our politicians say all the right things, but as long as these bills are not passing, it will not matter. It will not, and it cannot matter. We have to be more focused on the political change that underlies what we believe in, rather than thinking that the aesthetics is enough. The aesthetics are not enough. We need to actually believe in something, and not only that, we need a plan. We don't need. It's not like when I say a plan, I don't mean a couple of policy points that are going to bring you from election to election. What I mean is a plan that you can invest in for the next 60 years, because that's what we're up against. We're not up against the machinations of the alt right for the last 10 years, last 15 years. They've been working on this for 60, 70 years. And we had a head start. That's the sad part. We had a head start, right? So we need to actually invest in a plan that is outlasting us. We need to build a future upon bricks that will be substantive for our children and our children's children, and believe in it so much so that it is undeniable, that is irrefutable, that we will build towards it regardless of what is in our way. Whether we are in the majority or the minority, we are still on this plan, no matter what. That's what we need to believe in.
Imani Barbarin, look, I I appreciate you. I've said this like several times. I'm so glad that you've been on this Living Corporate podcast now twice. And, you know, the first time I had to work through, you know what I'm saying, 5 or 6 different assistants. This time you said, hey, just email me directly. And I was like, oh, wow, we've like elevated like as a relationship. And so like I felt that selfishly in my own ego, it felt really nice for me. So I just want to say thank you. Look, 2 questions for you. First question is there anything that you wish is there anything that we didn't talk about that you really hope that we talk about next time?
Well, we have to see what happens next time. We don't know what's happening from day to day, man. Like,
True.
We gotta. But what I will say is support your local self-advocacy groups, which are usually disabled people with developmental and intellectual disabilities that talk and advocate politically to their elected leaders amongst themselves. Support those groups. You can simply Google self-advocacy plus where you live to find a group. I would also encourage you to support the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, the Black Disability Collective, the Harriet Tubman Collective, people like Talila Lewis and Violet Thompson, Black disabled people that are on the ground doing a lot of the work. And make sure that you volunteer at your local elections. Take those trainings on accessibility. We have a massive problem coming down the pipeline when it comes to voting and accessibility. So be one of the volunteers, be one of the people that are trained to protect the voting rights of disabled people and Black and brown people in your neighborhoods.
Golly, you on it for real. And before we let you go, where can people find you? Where can people engage you? Where can people check out your work?
I'm Crutches and Spice everywhere. I'm trying to restart the blog, crutchesandspice.com, as well as get a lot of other things off the ground because, social media is very tentative right now. So I'm Crutches and Spice everywhere, and my book comes out in 2027. It's called If I Were You, I'd Kill Myself.
Okay, well, obviously we're going to have you on before the book drop, but That's fire. Y'all, this has been Imani. Thank y'all so much for checking out the Living Corporate podcast. Till next time. Peace.
Thanks.